Hi students, it's Mrs. T. I'm trying something a little different today. I'm going to talk to you about sociology information as usual, but instead of the whiteboard being behind me, I'm going to have this document up behind me with some basic notes on it that you need to elaborate on, not just write down this, but elaborate on as we discuss our next topic regarding the socialization process. So, I know it's a brand new concept. I think I only just introduced to you the concept socialization in the last video, or maybe the next to last video is the most recent time that you've heard me say that. So I know that it's a new concept to you. However, it's your job, you are required to learn the specific sociological definition of socialization well enough so that when I say that word, your brain doesn't click to focus on visiting and chatting and hanging out with friends. That's not what it means in sociology class. Instead, the socialization process, your brain should immediately, when you hear Mrs. T say that, your brain should immediately say, okay, we're talking about the learning process that all human beings go through. Well, let me put an asterisk by all right there, because today I'm actually going to tell you about some exceptions to that rule. But anyway, the socialization process is a lifelong learning process. The learning happens through social interaction, and through that social interaction, we gain knowledge and skills and abilities that help us get by in our particular time in life, our particular social group that we're in at that time in life. And the lifelong learning process, the reason we have the word lifelong in there is because your situation today is not the same situation that you were in when you were 10. So you need different knowledge, different skills, different ideas to get you through your daily routine at this stage in your life, and add 20 years to the mix, and you're going to have learned additional daily routine kind of skills and knowledge in order to get you through that particular phase of your life. So the socialization process is never over. It begins when we're born, and like I said in a previous video, some people say that it actually begins when you're in the womb. But there are some cultures actually that in China, for instance, and in some cultures in Africa, when a child is born, that's their first birthday, because the idea is that the child is alive in the womb and a part of the social group. So anyway, there's lots of different norms. Remember, society is different from place to place, culture is different from place to place, and so those attitudes about learning, about when learning begins, are also different. Okay, so socialization. Remember, we're talking about the learning process that makes us know how to interact with our particular social group. So in chapter 3, toward the beginning of the chapter, you're going to read about an ongoing debate. This debate is not settled, and I'm not here to give you the skills and knowledge that you will require to ever settle it, because this is an introductory class. But you probably have heard of the nature versus nurture debate before. You'll definitely hear about it in psychology class and in biology class too, probably, if you take those classes. But nature, in the nature versus nurture debate, stands for or refers to the biological makeup of being human. So we are human because of our DNA structure, because of our brain structure, because of bipedalism, which means we walk on 2 feet, because of opposable thumbs, those kinds of things. There's all kinds of unique things that we have biologically. Our ability to speak, for instance, because we can pass air over our vocal cords. Other animals have vocal cords, but their windpipe doesn't pass through them, so they can't make them vibrate like we do. Anyway, I'm getting to biology, anthropology with you right now. So let me go back to nature in the nature versus nurture debate. There's a ton of biological reasons why humans are unique in the animal kingdom. And on the nature versus nurture debate, those who lean more toward nature claim that all of those biological uniquenesses, if uniquenesses is a word, those are the primary source of why human behavior is human behavior. That there are some biological causes for the reasons why we behave the way that we do. And so on the nurture side, the flip side, which is where sociologists are firmly planted, the nurture side refers to the social environment, the learning experiences or the life experiences that we have that we're learning takes place. And the socialization process in general is the nurture side. Okay? So So sociologists are firmly on that side of the fence when we are talking about the nature versus nurture debate. However, we also are scientists, right? So we have to be careful not to reduce the causes of human uniqueness to one source or the next. And even though nature is a really broad source and nurture is a really broad source, we can't just be firmly on one side of the fence and neglect or disregard everything that the other side of the fence is saying, because that's not where good science happens. You have to be open to other points of views. You can't have biases in the way that you're asking your research questions. You can't do that, or you won't get valid and reliable information to be able to try to argue your side of things more effectively. Okay? So you'll read about the nature versus nurture debate, and it's important, the reductionism, I've got it written here in all caps. I'm screaming it at you, right? So reductionist, we cannot be reductionist because we can't, just say, oh, human behavior is caused by the socialization process, period. And that's it in a story. No debate. We can't do that because we won't have the full scope of scientific inquiry when we shut other people down like that. Okay, so that's not our thing. Don't do that. Okay. And the biologists don't either. Sociobiologists don't either. They don't just completely shut out the nurture side, right? You can take a psychology class. Psychology is kind of something that straddles the fence between nature versus nurture sometimes, because there are psychologists who really look at how we are hardwired and how, those brain synapses fire and all this kind of stuff, and literally look at the biological makeup as the determining factor, but they don't disregard the social makeup. There's actually a field called social psychology that those folks kind of lean more toward, the other side of the fence, but they're still kind of straddling the fence between biological reasons for psychology and social reasons for psychology. If you take that class, or if you're currently taking it, you probably can see what I'm talking about with some of the different lessons that you go back and forth between from one chapter to the next, and the case studies that you look at. So, nature versus nurture, ongoing debate. If you ever settle it, please text me 20 years from now, your old sociology teacher, and say, you know what? I settled it. Here it is. Start telling your classes this. And I will be happy to. I would love to be able to know a famous theorist someday and have it be you. And it's possible. So think big, okay? All right, so we can't be reductionists. We've said that already. And actually, the nature versus nurture debate is something that people research regularly, okay? So there are research studies that are focused on the organic or the biological causes of certain phenomenon in human behavior, and there are research studies that focus on the social causes. However, the social cause of human behavior is tricky to try to set up an experiment to test it, because in order to know, of course, in an experiment, of course, you have to have a control group and an experimental group, right? So you have to be able to withhold the variable for, that you think is the dependent variable. You have to be able to withhold that from one group so that you can see the outcomes after the experiment is over and decide, okay, well, there was an effect on this group because we introduced the variable here and we did not introduce the variable here. But if our main variable is the socialization process, and socialization happens simply from interaction with other human beings from day one that we start breathing oxygen, then how could we take a control group of babies and pull them from human contact from their very first day and just like throw them in a room together and see how they fare? Do you already see the problems with this? Even if that was ethical or moral or legal or keep on filling in the blank, that would not give us anything, because the human animal, when we are born, we need extra care for quite a while of our lives. We have kind of a long upbringing process, and I'm not talking about 0 to 18, because we can probably take care of ourselves and feed ourselves and stuff like that. Maybe, on average, I don't know, around 10 years old or something, but that's not the norm. in our society. So 18 is the norm in our society. But anyway, we can't set up an experiment to truly measure how significant the socialization process is for human beings because it's unethical, criminal even, immoral, keep on filling in the blank, what it would be if you deprived human beings from contact with other human beings. We would call it abuse, for instance. You will read in your chapter 3, which I'm directing you to right now, you will read about something called feral children. You might have already heard of that term before. If not, Google it, please, so you can read more about it than even your textbook includes. Feral is a word that means wild. I remember, I didn't know the word myself in common language, but my husband did. I remember when we first got married, too many years ago to count, he said something about, he came inside and got the .22 rifle and said, I'm going to the barn, there's a feral cat out there. And I'm like, what does that, I don't know what do you mean a feral cat? I thought it was like a breed. I was like, don't kill the wild creature. But it was a wild creature that was eating our chickens. And yeah, he had to do away with it. So feral means wild, untamed, maybe even untamable. And unfortunately, listen to my word unfortunately there, unfortunately throughout recorded history, there have been a few examples of human children that researchers have discovered who were deprived of the typical expected socialization process that the rest of us, you and me, went through. Now, you and I did not have the same parents, have the same upbringing. You and your classmates did not have the same parents, the same upbringing. So we have a lot of differences among us. I'm not saying that these children who researchers discovered did not have the norms of USA society in their background, because the norms of US society, remember that ugly picture I drew a couple of lectures ago, looked like an orange with a big line through it. There's a huge amount of behaviors that are allowed in American society. I'm talking about children who did not have contact with human beings enough to learn how to speak, to learn how to interpret our symbols, to know material, non-material culture, to learn norms, values, etc. All of that list of the components of culture that we learned during week 3, I think it was. They didn't have enough contact to even learn that communication style, to understand basic communication. There's a couple of examples that are given in the textbook. I believe Jeannie, the Wild Child, is one of them. You can look that up on YouTube. I'm sure it is. It's an old Nova documentary called Jeannie, the Wild Child. Jeannie spelled like genie in a bottle. And you can watch that documentary. I think it's like 90 minutes long or something. It's extremely, I don't know whether to tell you you're going to enjoy it. You will enjoy it, but it's not because it's hugely entertaining. It's just so shocking and horrific, really. And you know, something in our USA makeup we just can't take our eyes off. Train wreck kind of things like that. But she was deprived of a regular socialization process. She did have caregivers, but they locked her in a room. They taped her to a potty chair. It was horrific. It was terrible abuse. You should watch that if you want to learn more. I think it would be helpful for psychology classes too. There's a little boy in, I think, 18th century France. His name was Victor, or they named him Victor after they captured him. If I understand the story correctly, he was behaving very much like a wild animal in the woods. There's no direct evidence that he was actually raised by wolves or anything, like some fairy tales claim that, you know, human man cubs or whatever can be raised by wild animals in the woods. But this boy, according to researchers' journals, behaved very much like a wild wolf or coyote or something, feeding himself and eating animals alive. So please read that in your textbook and look it up online and consider both sides of the nature versus nurture debate, always with the lens of trying to understand what socialization is all about, and text me with questions. See you next time.